No, it's not. The video's not in the blog.
Drats.
I'll
All right,
do it.
hold on.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Drats. Wow, that's yeah. I haven't
No
heard
one's
that.
watching this right now, but that's okay. We are recording it, so you probably are watching it live later.
Somebody is.
A new camera today. I don't know if you can tell. It's
Not really.
a better camera. It's wider. It's a wider.
I can't because I'm not looking at you.
What, Mike?
Says I can't because I'm not looking at you because I'm.
Oh yeah, you don't have to worry about it. No, I'm not. I don't care what you think. I was just wondering. What,
Yeah, it's definitely wider, the angle on it.
yeah, and it's clearer too, which is not always a good thing, but trying.
We could really see the orange in your shirt.
Yeah, for sure.
He's got a nice tie on too. I was like, this.
That's like a good tie. That's a good tie.
I
bad
like
tie,
it.
right?
I like it.
Solid.
No, I like the tie.
Thanks. I'm trying to find like the best, because the hardest thing about this thing is like my natural instinct is to look at you guys, right, always, and you guys are down there. So if I always feel like I'm doing the show like this, like I'm talking and looking like this to somebody, and I hate that. Like, so I want to look at the camera. So I've got to try to figure out how to do that the best way. It's maybe microphone placement. But yeah, to me, my way of doing it is making the window really, really tiny, and up as far close as I can to the camera.
Now, do you have your cufflinks in today?
No, I didn't. These come with buttons. Really cool 17th century invention. I believe buttons became. They must have been maybe 1700s, somewhere in there. But yeah, but cufflinks. Yeah, yesterday, man, that shirt was really disappointing. I can't even believe that they sell shirts that don't have buttons anymore. I don't see any point in that. I mean, cufflinks are cool and all, but that's like you're only wearing cufflinks if you're being dressed by someone. Like in my opinion, like if you're rich enough to be someone's like dressing you, and that only happens on Thursdays for me. So. Thursdays are the days that I get dressed by somebody. Not wealthy enough yet to do it 7 days a week, but I'm working on it. So yeah, so when I have people dressing me, then yes, the cufflinks perfectly. Otherwise, all right, yeah. So we're gonna get into Vegas today.
We're going to Vegas.
We're going to Vegas.
I want to do that.
I've never been.
We're going to. Oh, you've never been to Vegas?
How could you never be to Vegas? What's the matter with you?
Hey, whoa! I've never been to Vegas either, so there's plenty wrong with both of us.
You're like
You're
20-something. He's half dead. He has no.
Thanks,
Half
Russ.
dead.
I'm half dead. I mean, I admit it. What's the difference?
Jeez, thank you.
There
No,
you
I
go.
just honestly, I just now, there's like I'm not like one of those people who wants to go see Celine Dion or the shows, and I can gamble if I wanted to gamble. If I had the money to gamble, I would be doing it at the local Indian casino.
And that's why it's good for just the weekend. It's good for a weekend.
I'd like to someday, yeah.
Gamble every day of my life, Mike. Every day of my life is a gamble. That's how I see it.
I'll take your word for it.
Yes, there's lots of kids. You got these things.
So we're really not going to Las Vegas. You lie.
No, according to ESPN, so now it must be true.
And AP.
And the AP, yeah, another organization from the 1900s. They both believe that we are definitely going to Vegas.
So does that mean we have to wait for the confirmation from UPI and Mother Jones?
Right. My kids use that. The reason I'm using the term, my kids use the term 1900s all the time now, which is really funny to hear them use it. They're like, "So, Dad, back in the 1900s, what was it like to?"
No, but you know what? You did say something that's correct, and I know we know a few
Thanks.
guys that work with AP. But I'm
Your
gonna,
broken clock is right twice a day.
There you go.
but I'm going to say
A
that
lot of people on the internet agree with that.
when I started Sportsology back in 2000, we were looking at AP feeds. We were like, all right, let's see if we should do that. And the cost was so prohibitive.
Oh, it's crazy.
We were just like, why would we do this? Like, everybody has these art.
Yes.
This article basically is in a million places. Why are we even doing this? I'm even surprised the service still exists, I'll be honest.
No, I am too. I mean, it's old school journalism,
Yeah.
Let's move this over like that. Here we go.
I mean, there's still, there's still irons, so I guess there's still AP. So.
Yeah, and you still have to, yeah, no, for sure. There's a lot. But I think that now we are definitely sure we're going there, and and it will be successful. I mean, it will be successful for a while. I think it's going to have an initial boom for sure, and they have the 14,000.
I'm not worried about it for like 5 years.
Right, that's like the whole key. I mean, because there's going to be a really big, every fan of their team's going to want to go. Hey, our team's in Vegas next weekend. You
But
know.
how do you build a local home fan base? Because that's the most important thing, I think.
Yeah.
It's going to be great for people who want to go see their team, but you also have to find a way to make it work for having an actual home team.
Well,
Right.
how many veteran NHL reporters will be applying for that Las Vegas newspaper job to cover the?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. If the news, how much will the Las Vegas newspaper cover the team is a big question too. You know, that's
they're
but I'm
the
assuming
first
since
major
they
league
have a sports section, right? So, and this is the first sports team. I mean, there are some benefits to that. So this should get a lot. I mean, UNLV right now is the big news in Vegas, right? That's always been the big news, like UNLV.
It's always been they own the town. Like that's the biggest worry is everybody's a UNLV person.
Right.
We don't know if everybody's going to be a hockey person.
Well, we'll find out.
Right, but this is the first pro team, and if the Raiders go there in a year or two, I mean, still the NHL will be the first one in there. So, well, why don't we start the show? And we can talk.
Okay, let's start the show here. Go.
What show? I thought we were going to Vegas. You guys suck.
I know. Hold on. Sorry.
It's like boarding an airplane.
It is.
I know. The worst.
I'll do this again, Mike. Sorry. My thing just
You don't
started
have
playing
row
music
F.
for no reason at all. My phone just started playing music.
You're not in zone Q.
Yeah. Hello, Hockey World. It's Tuesday, June 14th, 2016.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Jillian Fisher.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on your comings and goings in the hockey world. And today we're talking about a going or a coming, depending on where you are. The NHL is going to be coming to Vegas. And this is according to the AP and ESPN and all of us last week. But that's what's happening right now. And yeah, this is like I said last week when I wrote about this.
I was really worried about this.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, gosh, the best line I heard about this whole thing definitely came from another owner who said, you can't take away Christmas from the owners at this point. There's no way you can put out Vegas that's Vegas is a possibility and not give them Vegas. It would be like not getting your bike for Christmas.
Right.
So the NHL should have done what my parents used to do, which is like hide the really cool present until the very end. So the board of governors not talk about it, and then say, okay, see you later. And everybody wait, what's going? Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention. That's how they should have done it. But
my parents got really dumb about it. What they did was they started putting the presents in like the closet in the back, and my brother figured it out one day. So then the night before was more like Hanukkah or Christmas. We used to celebrate.
Oh yeah, when you figured out where they were hidden.
Yeah, we knew exactly where they were, so then we could we couldn't break them open, but we could at least scout them. It was good.
Yeah, I never had that problem because I never got presents.
But get Cole, is that what you got?
Right, exactly. It was good for the summer.
Good talking to.
Well, I was just going to say, go ahead.
The thing that's interesting here is that the announcement, the NHL said that the reveal of this information would happen by the 22nd, and we're getting it almost over a week before that. And
well, yeah, I mean, that was coming.
I mean, it was right. It's a foregone conclusion. Actually, the funny thing is that I think the bigger surprise, and maybe it was cooked, sort of cooked in the books, is that Quebec was not part of this, and now we may have to wait for this situation with Carolina, if it ever comes to fruition, whether that has to do with Quebec or not. But I mean, this was not a shock, and now I think what everybody's going to be interested in is the parameters for the expansion draft, because I think a lot of teams will adjust their decisions this summer and during the season, next season, to accommodate for that expansion draft.
Well, let me ask Eck this question, because I think I know the answer, but I don't know if I know the answer. So now that we know that Vegas is definite and the owners stand to make their X amount of money, of course the league is going to make something out of this too. And is that enough for them to sort of float Carolina for another year now, just so they don't have to deal with it?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that the league is going to make anything out of it, to be honest. The way I was told that this works is it is a split between all the owners, straight up. The league only exists as a way of keeping the owners I mean, it's not like they get a percentage of everything the owners make. They exist on like many times when Bettman has talked about this, and the way this organization is set up is the NHL is only as strong. It can only do things that its owners tell it to do. So it has no other power. So the owners would have to give the NHL money, and I don't see that happening. The owners have to say, okay, you guys can take 5% of it or whatever.
The NHL has a line of credit. The NHL is loaning teams money.
Yeah, no, I mean that's true, and the NHL has plenty of money. So I mean, in general, to help Carolina.
So knowing that there's more income coming in for seats and everything else, is that enough to keep Carolina at bay for another year?
Yeah. I mean, it will mean more revenue for the. I mean, the NHL does take a portion of every game ticket. So, but the actual expansion fee will go probably not to any of them at all. But that is true, I think, and it is another revenue stream for sure. It should help the salary cap down the line.
Well, no, it's not hockey-related revenue.
Well, no, not the sale, but the actual just having another team is hockey-related revenue.
Well, it's okay. It's the players will benefit because there'll be 50 more pro contracts. Mm-hmm. But the actual expansion fee is not considered hockey-related revenue, so it won't go towards increasing the cap. This is strictly each owner is going to get $16.6 million. An equal share, 500 million divided by 30 teams. That's what's going to happen. And that, I'm sure for teams that are hurting financially, I'm sure Eugene Melnick has been counting the days till he gets that 16.6 million in his hands. But to other teams, it's not going to really mean anything. But I think that the opportunity to have a second team, there are other teams out there that probably would want that extra another 16 million and probably aren't going to get it for a couple years. So, Russ. So, I've heard a few things in terms of the expansion draft. We've heard that 8 players, 1 goaltender, or the 7-3-1. I think some teams. A team like Nashville is going to take the 8 players. They're not because they have more defensemen to protect.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I think that they're not the only one. Yeah. I think now that this is a defensive-driven league again, and it's heavy in that area, I think a lot of teams are going to go that route because, to me, you've got to be a pretty special forward if I'm actually going to protect you. And that's something where I think forwards are going to be on notice this year with their teams. Like, hey, if you're not putting out the 20, 25 goals, 30 goals that we're expecting of you, you may end up unprotected. Because, look, at the end of the day, players hate to be unprotected. It gives them a little bit of, agita. They don't know what's going to happen family-wise. They don't know if they're going to have to get up and move or if it's just a one-year thing. And so that, I think, is going to help the owners as far as motivating players. I do.
No, I recently had a discussion with an owner who, not an owner, sorry, a person in the administration side of things for a team who used to also be a player agent. So he's sort of looking at this thing both sides. He understands, like, now he's part of the NHL, where before he was part of the player side of things. And although they've said that the whole concept of the way this is going to work with when you're protecting guys with, whether or not a guy has a no movement clause, no trade clause, all those different sorts of things, although they say that's been worked out, I'm still hearing a lot of debate about that. Like I don't think that that's a done thing at all. I think it's done, but I don't think we've heard the last of it. Put it that way. Like I think the NHL thinks this is the way it's going to happen, but we're going to see challenges to the way it's going to happen before we get there, and we could possibly even see court cases about this before we get there.
Well, there's already been changes from what they said as the original parameters to what was released what Bill Daly talked about at the beginning of the final. There was that 25% of the salary cap situation in the first release of what was purported to be the parameters for expansion, and then that went by the wayside. So, and we know there's something going on with no move clauses. It sounds like that there was some agreement between the PA and the owners regarding.
There's no agreement. There's no agreement because I talked about that. What there is there's the PA has the NHL has basically are interpreting something in the CBA one way that gives them the right to make a player with a no movement clause.
Right.
Available. That makes that where the NHL PA, because nothing was written directly into. It's not like directly into the CBA. Remember, everything comes back to the CBA. That's why we spend a whole year of our lives getting the CBA ready and missing hockey. It comes back to the
let's talk about the CBA just for a second. It's this thing that we work on forever so that we could work around it in the end.
Well, that's all, and that isn't that true with any contract, right? So that's contract's only good as the paper it's written on, and sometimes it's not even worth that. The CBA is that way too, but what happens here is that the NHL and the NHLPA are very strictly interpreting the CBA, but they're interpreting it different ways. So what's going to happen? I mean, but the fact of the matter is, I mean, if I have a no movement clause, I'm a player who's signed a no movement clause. I've done that for a specific reason. I've done that so I can keep my family where I am. I don't have to be traded. I don't have to go anywhere else, and I've got security. And I sign with your team because you're willing to give me that security. I might take less money for that security. All that's part of negotiation, right? So no movement clause means no movement. Now the question comes up. Okay, now you're allowed to expose me so I could be moved to Vegas without any. And the NHL will say, well, in the contract, yes, it says that we can do. In the CBA, it says we can do that. We can do whatever we need to for the betterment of the game. There's that topic has come up a bunch. You'll hear that in the future, I'm sure. For the betterment of the game, these players are allowed to move. Well, the players themselves are going to argue in court that they have a no movement clause and they can't. They have to decide on it themselves. So we are going to be up against. We're still going to be up against this. I can guarantee you. And then the real question beyond that goes into, okay, so let's say all players with no movement clauses can't be moved. If that happens, then teams are going to be forced to protect them. If teams are forced to protect them, because it's not just going to be like these guys are exempt, because then you can protect everyone. If you give your no movement clauses guys and you can protect so and so, you can't make them exempt. They either have to be able to be moved, and so no movement clause doesn't count, or you have to protect them within your group that you're protecting. And these are the players that you don't want to have to protect. Some of them. So there's not a have your cake and eat it too here thing. So what's going on?
The CBA, the clause in the CBA doesn't say it has a specific term, but it doesn't say whether or not it relates to an expansion. So that's the gray. There's this big gray area in there, and that's going to be fun to have to hear them go back and forth about.
It's going to be a little bit of a shell game too, because let's just say that we played marbles the other day and you won. And now you have to get a couple of my marbles, but you're going to come over tomorrow to get them. So, like, in between...
I am coming over tomorrow to get your marbles, Russ.
Okay. Well, in between today and tomorrow, I'm calling Mike and I'm calling Jillian, and I'm going to get rid of some of my better marbles because I don't want you to get them.
You better not give your marbles away because you've agreed to those marbles with me previously.
No, but you'll just see the marbles that I have for you on that day, not maybe my best ones. And
I'm not okay with that.
It's clear that I've lost my marbles.
As a fine marble collector, Russ, and I've won your particular marbles. If you give your marbles to Jillian, I'm also going to bring her into this lawsuit, and this thing's going to grow.
You won't know about it. This will be a done deal. You won't even know about it. You'll never.
I'll know about it. I'm not an idiot. I keep track of my marbles. I'm smart enough. These guys are smart enough. They'll know about this. You won't be able to pull something over.
No,
them.
I mean they're going to see that players are going to get traded and moved or whatever. But by the time Las Vegas is going there to pick, they're not picking from the best anymore. They're picking from what teams want you to pick from.
Right. And that's...
But there's some teams that have so many players with no trade and no movement clauses. I mean, there's some teams out there that have 7 to 10 players. I'm sorry, that's too many. That's just too many. And I think that's a problem in general because that also makes issues when it comes to the trade deadline. I feel like it makes it less exciting.
Well, that's not too bad because GM sort of got locked into that because after this last CBA, that was the way they were able to keep their core players, right? So they all did it, and now there's all of a sudden an expansion, which now makes the fact that they did that a negative. And so they didn't know it.
What this does is it sort of flies in the face of Bill Daley's pie-in-the-sky comments about the fact that the team that Las Vegas is going to get could conceivably challenge for a playoff spot. There's no way on God's green earth that this team, if the NHL teams are able to craft and manipulate the system, that team will even be close to a playoff spot for probably 3 to 5 years. But I think it's a benefit to the owners and a benefit to this franchise being successful that they give them at least a fighting chance. And that's where there's going to be some difficulty because I think teams are going to lose players that they don't really want to lose. But I think in the end, it's for the betterment of the league and revenue and of all those things.
Yeah, and now think about it this way too: by only bringing one team in, that changes instead of 2 teams in, that changes the whole thing too. Because if you were losing, now every team's only going to lose 1 player, right? And that's so. But now if you're losing 2 players in the same year, that's a different thing than if you lose one player one year and one player another year. So I think because one player every other year is a lot easier to take than two players the same year. Two players the same year would have been a bigger deal. So this is part of the NHL's. I would not be surprised if part of the whole concept of only bringing in one team was somehow some people who are really upset about the whole
thing. So here's what Nashville did. Nashville in 98, 99 came in 12th. Then they came in 13th. Then they came in 10th. Then they came in 14th. Then they came in 13th. Then they came in 8th.
Right.
So how many? I'm sorry, I lost count. How many years was that? Like
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Year 6.
Year 6, I mean. Year 6, that's realistic,
That's
I think.
About right. That's what I'm
because when you think of the Leafs, they're 6 years away right now, and they're basically an expansion team. So, I mean,
but
this whole thing.
Is that too long for a team in Vegas? I mean, it feels like a culture of immediacy there. You know, that it's immediate, like gambling or just in general, things happen quickly, and they want it right away.
It's not gonna happen. Like you're.
Well, I think it's the honeymoon period too, right?
I completely agree, but I'm saying
the honeymoon period is going on, right? The honeymoon period is going on. So yes, there's going to be a period of time where people are just going to go to the game
in Vegas.
Yeah, the honeymoon in Vegas, right? So people are going to be able to just stay with this for a little while still. But I do think by the time that the whole allure of it has gone away, the team should be pretty good.
But the thing is the league runs into trouble. I mean, this isn't Ottawa. This isn't a market where the fans are predisposed to being hockey fans, and they'll be patient while the team takes Alexander Daig and other players in the top 3 or 4, and they slowly develop. I mean, I think the NHL realizes that this is a market where you're going to have to sort of get off to a little bit of a running start, and teams are going to have to give up some players. I mean, obviously, the whole NHLPA thing regarding no move clauses is something that's going to be, negotiated, and maybe have to go to some sort of arbitration to do that. But if they actually make it really difficult for this team to get at least decent players and to get a team that is not an embarrassment. I mean, if they go in and they're automatically the worst team in the league, then you're going into a market that may tune it out after a year or two.
But here's the one thing about the market: they're eager for it. As of April, they had secured the deposits for 14,000 seats, and 100% of the luxury suites were sold. So 14,000, that's 70% of that arena is already sold. Now you say, yeah, you're going to get a team. I guarantee you more people are going to be interested.
Oh yeah, more people are jumping on.
You have that honeymoon phase, and I think that if you can make it worth their while for at least a year or two,
right.
By that time you start developing, you can retain some fans, and then maybe there's a year or two where they drop off. But then if they start taking up that upslide like you see it in Nashville, fans will start coming back. Oh, the team was good. That was so fun. Let me go back.
The question is how long those commitments are for the corporate boxes and for the tickets. I know that like in Winnipeg, they said that they were going to be sold out of their corporate boxes and their tickets for 5 years. There was that, I think it was 5 years. There was that window that you were guaranteed to get a certain amount of money each of the first 5 years, and depending on the product after that, then the number would go up or go down. I mean, in Vegas, you got a brand new building, you've got a brand new team. There's going to be the initial excitement for the first year or two, but after that, if you don't start to give them a product that they're interested in, then you may be in trouble. That's why I'm saying I think that.
Here's the funny thing: you need 5 years because it takes 3 to 5 years for your best prospects to get to the next level, and at some point they'll be mainly a team of prospects. So if they're good at drafting, maybe they can cut a year off of that, but you can't start drafting guys because you think they're going to get to the NHL quicker, because that's how you'll run into trouble. So I think fans will realize, hey, it's gonna take that long. There'll be a few names of guys they liked on other teams for a couple of years that they could buy jerseys of and have fun with. It's gonna be better than the Wranglers. Basically, day 1 it's better than the Wranglers. Day 2 it's already better than the XFL. So it's gonna be entertaining enough for a while. But I think they've got 5 years.
You need a really good marketing team that can really sell that product, and I think that's going to be a huge factor to their long-term success. Is how can you get these fans and keep them around in years 3, 4, and 5. That's going to be really important.
That's going to be huge. Also looking forward now to the fact that we have a new coach in Anaheim, and kind of a new old coach in Anaheim.
New old coach, yes.
Randy Carlyle returning to the Ducks. A lot of people A lot of mixed signals on this. Some people, I know we all have probably different opinions on the panel. My first opinion here is, all right, it's okay. It's not terrible. It's not great. I do see why they did it. I see that they're looking at Perry and Getzlaf and those guys. They have so much money invested in them, and Carlisle got the most out of those players. So you can sit there and you can argue that. Boudreaux didn't get a lot out of those players at times. You could also just say those players are falling off their game a little bit at this point in their careers too. So it's a little bit tricky there. But Carlisle was very successful, in Anaheim, and it was surprising when Carlisle was fired from Anaheim. Carlisle, you also worked with him, Mike, when you covered the Maple Leafs. So he's a solid coach. He's a solid person. Yeah. He really does care about hockey. He really did love hockey in Anaheim and still has a place out there. So he loved living out there. Who wouldn't? So he's really kind of excited about that, and I think it's an okay move. I had heard, and I want to tie this in sort of to the Calgary Flames, where I'm hearing Kevin Dineen is a big possibility here, as possibly their coach coming up in the next little bit here. But let's start with you, Mike. What are you thinking of Carlisle in Anaheim?
Well, first, I'm very happy for Randy Carlisle because a lot of people in Toronto made him the scapegoat of the collapse of the Maple Leafs, and I've always said that I thought it was that core group, that dysfunctional core group, that was mainly at fault. He got that group into the playoffs when maybe they didn't deserve to get there, and got them to Game 7 against a vastly superior Boston team, but there were so many flaws with that team. I don't really think it was his fault. There was he was being attacked for being, an old-style, arcane coach. He won a Stanley Cup in Anaheim. There was a bit of a tone deafness with that team when he did get fired at the end of 2011. The funny thing is that apparently Bob Murray went to the core group of players, Getzlaf, Perry, Kessler, and got them to sign off on Carlisle. They actually said, yes, we want him back.
Well, actually, more than that, they were actually lobbying for him. From what I heard, they were pushing hard for his return. Yeah,
and other ex-players like Teemu Selanne, I guess, who was some sort of advisor with the Ducks, was very in favor of Carlisle coming back. I mean, he did not have a ton of talent to work with in Toronto. He has a ton of talent to work with in Anaheim. He's got goaltending. He's got a deep defense, and he's got some very good forwards. Yeah. It's just a question of whether he can get the most out of guys like Getzlaf and Perry. I think it's a good hire. I think it's a now hire. This team needs to win in the next couple years. You've got Getzlaf, Perry, Kessler, all around 30 years old. It's sort of similar to Pittsburgh. In a couple years, these guys are going to be on the downslope of their career, and they got to win now. And I think Carlisle is the type of coach who can get them to win now.
Right, Russ?
Well, I think Carlisle is a good coach. I think you could be a great coach when you have two Hall of Fame defensemen running things for you. That helps you be a great coach, and so he doesn't have that anymore. When you're a GM and you go ask the leadership group who you want, when they tell you the guy that they want is the guy they had before that didn't respond to, I would say, hey, great, I appreciate your input. I'm going a different direction, just so they're not comfortable. I'm so worried about this team falling into the same trap that they've been into before because it's the same guy. If I go to practice and I do X amount in the off season and I know what I can get away with at practice, I'm going to still be able to get away with it at practice. If I bring in someone new, I have to pay attention every single – we saw this with Dave Haxtell. Nobody knew what he was going to do. He didn't give his plan over the summer when we kept asking him. Players had no idea what to expect, and they had to be on their toes for practice for the entire year. The worst thing you could do is ask the core group who they want. It's not their decision. The decision should be the GM and the owners. Who do you want? Because this hasn't been working. Get something different. They didn't get something different. I think Randy Carlisle is a good coach. But again, when you have Niedermeyer and Pronger, two of the best defensemen that ever played the game, I can't give you full credit for winning the Stanley Cup as a coach. I'm sorry.
Well, I know that it was mentioned that the top three candidates for that job were Carlisle, Rick Bowness, who is a retread. He's a former Ottawa head coach and assistant coach with Tampa Bay right now, and Travis Green, the Utica coach, who's going to probably get an NHL job pretty soon.
Yeah.
But, to me, it was mostly the fact that this team needs to win now, and he's won a cup.
You know what the problem is too, Mike? The problem is Travis Green's going to get a coaching job for a team with very little promise, and they're going to be like, "Here you go, kid. See what you can do with it." Instead of giving him a team that actually has a lot of weapons to see what he can do with it.
That's always the case, isn't it? I mean, like the veteran coaches get the veteran teams a lot of time, and it should be the opposite. You really should. You could get more out of a young team with a good chiseled veteran coach, I would think.
Yes.
And I think they can still, like you said, I understand what you said, Mike. Like they need a win now type of coach, but you can still win now with a new coach. I think if anything, Hackstall has proven that. That team, the Flyers, were not supposed to do anything this year. They actually set the expectation to be like, we're not going to even make the playoffs, was the expectation.
Right.
And they, mind you, in round one, it may not have been the best, but at a certain point in that series, they even found a way to almost hold their own for 2 games. So you can still win now with a new coach. You just have to take the time and find the right candidate. And I'm not saying that Carlisle's a bad person. I think he's a great coach, and I'm happy that he has the job. I'm just saying that you can still win now, even if it's a new coach.
It's all based on the comfort level of the general manager. I mean, we've even said, on previous webcasts that, Bob Murray may be in trouble, and I don't think Bob Murray is, if he's going to roll the dice, he's going to roll the dice with somebody he knows, somebody who's got a resume. I mean, I think Travis Green can be a very good NHL coach, but the thing is, it could be Dave Hackstall, it could be somebody who didn't work out. So I think he's going for, in a way, the safe choice, but a guy who has won there before. So
it kind of reminds me a little bit of when we were talking about Murray versus Fleury. If you started Murray after all of that, everyone's like, well, at least he started Murray. He did the thing that we thought he should have, and even though they lost, he did what we thought they should have. And in this case, they went with the safer choice. He did what people thought he should have done. And if you go with the new guy, the new coach, and they lose and everything implodes, and all of a sudden, like, why did you go with the new guy? And everyone's getting all up in arms. So it's a risk that you have to take, and it's apparently he's not willing to put it out there. Just there maybe is more to it that we don't know.
Here's the thing: we always say and that if a guy wins a Stanley Cup, it's his resume, right? That's part of your, and it's always going to be a part of your resume. But the same thing, if I go for a job now, right, and I'm going for a hotel job, and they're going to be like, when's the last time you worked in a hotel? And I'm going to say 1996, and they're going to be like, well, why should I hire you now? Well, I was great then. We were the #1 hotel then.
Right.
I mean, what point does it come off your resume when you've won the Stanley Cup but haven't even sniffed it or even gotten close to it in X amount of years? I mean, that's to me, if I'm an owner, I have to be looking at that.
And because the game changes, just like every other industry changes, this game, if anything, we saw the Stanley Cup final, the game is faster than we ever thought it would be. We didn't realize speed was going to be that important. The game is constantly changing, and it's a different game than when he won the Cup.
Well, Randy Carlyle was in the mix for the San Jose job before Peter DeBoer was hired. So, and he was only let go by Toronto in January of 2015. So it's not like he's been out of the loop for 5 years. It's been a year and a half. So, I don't think his ways are completely archaic. He's probably going to bring in some assistant coaches who will help him along in that respect if he has lost touch a bit. But I just think that he's got the resume. He's been there before. He lives in Southern California. It's a comfortable transition. We know that Anaheim is going to be making some changes. This summer they're probably going to trade one of their probably Frederick Anderson. They're probably going to trade one of their defensemen because they can't sign more. Both RFAs in Vatanen and Lindholm. So there's going to be some changes in the organization, and Carlisle goes along with those changes. I think that they were the team that everybody thought was going to be at the top of the heap, and they fell short. So I think that going back to Carlisle makes a bit of sense, but it could backfire. It could.
Moving on to the Blues, who've signed Mike Yao as an assistant coach, right? And but with the intention of him taking over Hitchcock's job. So an interesting thing here, an apprenticeship essentially, which is fascinating. You don't see that every day. It's a very weird move for a team like the Blues, I think, who are in this spot.
Hard thing to do, though. I got to tell you, somebody did that for me once in the business world. They were like, "Hey, I'm going to leave you." I was a district manager. They're like, "I'm going to leave you my district," right? And so as time went on, he kept telling me that, and it was like he was going to retire. And it was his last year, and what I noticed was in that last year how his district was sort of like deteriorating in front of my eyes because he knew. Now I'm not saying this is going to happen with Hitchcock, but things change, right? And so I noticed the district was deteriorating, and before I could take over his district, I took another district. And he looked at me like, why would you do that? And I was like, because it was offered to me. But the real reason was because I wanted it to be completely fresh, because Mike Yeo is going to go in next year, and a lot of the things that Hitchcock had set up, he's going to have to break down. He's not going to be able to carry through the Ken Hitchcock system, because really Ken Hitchcock's the only guy that does that.
And assuming that if this goes well, this is fine. But if this doesn't go well, then what? Then
it's a hard thing. It sounds easier than it is.
And here's the other thing about assistant coaches, and I think this is what I think is the most important point about this. And I'm glad I'm the one making it. This is the most important point. Assistant coaches have different relationships with players, right? And so he's an assistant coach this year. And when you're an assistant coach, you get closer with the players. The idea is the assistant coach is the good cop in the bad cop, good cop scenario with the head coach. So he's going to be close, and we saw this happen with Craig Berube in Philadelphia.
I was going to say that's exactly what happened with Craig Berube.
Yeah, an assistant coach comes in and has a tough time being the bad cop now because he has a relationship with all these guys he's been good cop with for such a long time. And so if things go great and everything's fine and they win the Stanley Cup and then Mike Yeo takes over, that's no big deal. But if they fall apart for some reason, which is possible, if not probable, and depending on the Western Conference, what you consider falling apart. I mean, if you don't, they got pretty far this time around, but will they get it to the conference finals again? And what's the expectation? They have to make the Stanley Cup for a successful season now. So
they need bad cop, worse cop. That's what they need.
Yeah, and if things go badly, you really want to just clear it out.
Well, one of the things that they said was difficult is the fact that they could not find assistant coaches that were willing to take one-year deals. And that's a reality. We know that Kirk Muller walked away, Brad Shaw walked away because they wouldn't take one-year deals. And this is a way, because basically the assistant coaches that they hire on top of Yeo, who's an associate coach, will probably transition into the assistant coaches when he takes over as head coach after next year. Right. The only thing I see is if they have a bad first half, then you might see Hitchcock fired and Yeo just move into the head coaching job right away.
I don't think they'll fire Hitchcock at all this year. I think he's got the whole year. I think that would be the worst PR move they could ever do. Not to say it can't happen, because it's sports, anything can happen. But I just don't think he's getting fired. I don't.
But why? If they have a horrible start, wouldn't you want them to still at least have a chance to go for the playoffs? I just am curious what you think is.
I think you do. About it. I think you do, but I think what you do then is sort of ruin the whole Ken Hitchcock era by doing this, because you're not even letting him go out on his own terms now and trying to turn it around.
Yeah, but the Ken Hitchcock era is first-round losses in every year except this one. So it's really not anything.
St. Louis hasn't been to the Stanley Cup in a billion years. So I don't know if there's anything to lose anyhow in the end result. But I just think if they want to hold Ken Hitchcock in high regard in the future, they can't fire him this year.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's very true. I think it opens up more problems than it does solutions. I just do. I do too. Well, I think although it's hard to get assistant coaches for one-year jobs, there are a lot of assistant coaches out there. So eventually, people are going to have to settle for one-year jobs.
I'll just look. I'll go back to the New York Jets. Bill Parcells hired Bill Belichick and gave him a position that didn't even exist in the NFL as assistant head coach. So when Bill Parcells was going to walk away, Bill Belichick would be the coach, and Bill Belichick was the coach of the Jets for about 35 seconds.
Yeah, right. I remember. Yeah, that's. This seems to be creating a problem you don't have to create. And you don't have to do this. There's no reason you have to do this. So to me, yeah, it's a little bit of an issue. I think moving forward, it's going to be very tricky. Let's get to some rumors and the prospect of the day today.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Let me just one thing, because you touched on Calgary. There are some reports, because that's the only job that's still left. There are some reports that Glenn Gulletson, who was a former head coach of the Dallas Stars, who's an assistant right now in Vancouver, is the leading candidate and probably will be named head coach in the next few days. They say leading candidate, but it sounds like he's going to get the job.
I heard Deneen has been taking. I heard he's making a really strong push down the stretch. Put it that way. So whether he might still be the guy. But Kevin Dean had a late interview, has impressed a lot of people, and put some doubt into the whole. I think that was the original plan, but now I think there's some questions for sure that are going on. Let's touch base with some rumors. Let's start with San Jose, because we have a backup goalie there named James Reimer, who is a UFA and rumored to be going in all different directions. Mm-hmm. And, who knows what's going to happen there. I'm going to let you talk on San Jose for 1 second, Mike. I'll be right back. I got to take one little quick sojourn. I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, Eck wrote in his column this morning that there's a potential return of James Reimer to Toronto. Wow, is that Kaya, Russ?
Yeah, there's a whole work crew outside the house. I'm surprised it took that long, to be honest.
Yeah, yes. Well, and I'll let Eck defend himself here, or defend his source here, but I can tell you that the directions, I perceive two directions that the Leafs go in terms of their goaltending. They're going to add goaltending. They're probably going to draft one or two goaltenders in the draft. They're definitely going to go for somebody either to back up Jonathan Bernier or become the starter. And whoa, that's too much of a close-up there, Eck.
Oh, hey. Hi, Eck.
Yeah, wow.
Nice source, Mike. Okay. Yes.
Okay, we had to recover from seeing your pores.
What were you saying?
No, I was basically saying that in no scenario that the Leafs are going to go down in terms of their goaltending, because I wrote today, one scenario is with Stamkos, one scenario is without Stamkos. Either one of those scenarios does not encompass James Reimer.
So who do you think they're going to bring in as the goalie?
Well, if they go for if they don't get Stamkos, I think they're going to maintain the rebuild as it's going along. They may and I think they'll probably go for a younger goaltender. I've mentioned guys like Calvin Pickard from Colorado, or Scott Wedgwood, who's a prospect in the New Jersey organization. There are a couple others in there, but guys who are 22, 23 years old on the cusp of making the NHL, who can grow with the core group that is currently there. If they go for Stamkos, they get Stamkos, then I think they're going to probably go for a veteran. They'll try to trade for Frederik Andersen or Marc-Andre Fleury, or maybe even sign a guy like a Cam Ward. That's a long shot. But I think they'll do that because I think part of bringing Stamkos in is accelerating the rebuild a bit. Reimer is a stopgap. He's not a starter. He's not a 1A. He's a 1B. He's a good guy, but he's an NHL backup. He's never proven that he's an NHL starter, and he proved it to Babcock that he's not an NHL starter. He got injured, he was inconsistent, and they traded him, and they got a draft pick for him. I don't think the organization wants him back. He's a good guy, but I don't think he's going back to Toronto.
I've obviously heard differently than that, but that for what it's worth, I mean, that's an opinion, and that and at least better than I do. But
I'll tell you what I think it is. I think it's. I heard P.A. Parento. It was written on Twitter on can't remember. I think it was Amanda Stein's account. He was on Montreal radio, and they asked him about Toronto, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Toronto. I'd love to go back. We're sort of like in a holding pattern. Everybody's in a holding pattern in Toronto. So if we listen to what agents say about guys possibly going to Toronto, they'll have like a 50 player roster." Right. So I think that's really where it's coming from. I'll go one further, Eck. I will drink 3 consecutive glasses of booster juice if James Reimer goes back to Toronto, because that's how confident I am he's not.
Why?
What, do you mean drink a toast? You're going to drink 3 cups of drink a toast?
Drink a toast,
yes.
All right.
Whatever that stuff is. Booster juice, drink a toast, whatever the heck it's called.
It's called drink a toast or take a boost or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but it's power. It's the blood that fuels my veins. But no, the whole thing.
There's no reason for them to go back to him because they have Antoine Bibeau, so if they want to use a young goalie for a year, they could use him, or Garrett Sparks. If you bring in Reimer back, there's sort of like this emphasis that you might be doing something winning-wise, but he's never really done it there. And he didn't play enough for San Jose to sort of change the outlook of what he might be in Toronto. Right. So I just don't see why they go back to him. If they're going to have a bad year, have somebody else play goalie, and if they're going to have a good year, have somebody else play goalie.
Yeah, I mean, if they're going to go down that direction, they'll just play Bernier 60 games. They don't need to go back to Reimer and make a 2 or 3 year commitment to him. Plus,
Reimer was a better goalie in Toronto than
I'm not saying he wasn't, but the thing is, Reimer wants to go someplace where he's going to be the number 1 guy.
But he's not going to be the number 1 guy. Like, you're right about what you say, Mike. He's not a number 1 goalie on a contending team. Right? But he is the number 1 goalie in Toronto, and And right now, because they're not a contending team yet. The point is, I think it's a little bit fascinating that you think, or that you believe that Stamkos would change things that drastically, because this team still has to, because I think that's dangerous. I mean, this team still has to stick to their plan of what they're doing if they're going to stay with it. Stamkos doesn't make them immediately a playoff team.
No, but I think
Marc-Andre Fleury, that's not the right move for them.
But I
think
think
you're not going to give Steven Stamkos the sales job of Steven. We're still going to be bad for 3 years.
No, of course not.
But you can't say that to him. He's not signing his deal if you do it.
Right.
Oh no, I agree. They're not going to say he's going to be. I mean, believe me, the whole thing of them being bad and pain and all this stuff is a media fan thing, and to them, internally, they do believe that they can be. I mean, we're talking about the egos of Babcock, Lamoriello, Shanahan. You're going to sit there and say that they all think they're going to suck again? I mean, they don't. They see Marner. They now have they almost have Austin Matthews in their back pocket right now. They think they're going to be good. And
okay, but if Babcock liked Reimer, why didn't he just keep him?
Because they could get something for him, and they knew he would come back there because he told them he would come back there. And the fact is that's what I was told. And the fact is they said, we can move him. They don't need him this year, so they got something for him. And with the intention that they did like him, and they actually played better than they wanted him to at times. I was told that as well. And
what do you think his contract would be if he goes back?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, guess what?
Well, that's okay.
I don't. I wasn't told the contract what it would be.
No, I know.
I know it's something I know it's something that works for the Leafs, the organization. So it's probably not big. It's probably not a large contract. It's probably something. Reimer doesn't have a whole lot of options. Okay, there are not that many places for a starting goalie right now in the NHL.
Calgary. There's a few places.
But there are plenty of real starting goalies ahead of him, like
Calgary,
Fleury and Anderson, and the two players you mentioned, Fleury and Anderson. They're both actual starting NHL goalies that Calgary is going to go after. Calgary, Dallas, they might go after one of them. But there aren't that many places. Carolina, perhaps. Yep. But Reimer is your 1B. And for that, that might be 1B. It seems like the perfect kind of goalie for Toronto to have right now.
Yeah. Yes, but the thing is that really doesn't advance the ball. And then right now the Leafs, other than Calgary, have the thinnest goaltending scenario in the NHL. Garrett Sparks is an RFA. It's 50-50 whether they even qualify him. Antoine Bibeau had an up-and-down year in the AHL. They signed a free agent kid from Minnesota, Duluth, who they may give some opportunity to in the minors. But they have right now just Jonathan Bernier as an NHL-caliber goaltender. They're probably going to sign either a backup or make Bernier the backup or trade Bernier during the summer. So
if James Reimer said he'd be the backup, then I think they would bring him back because he's never played more than 37 games. But I don't think James Reimer wants to be the backup. I think that's the issue.
James Reimer said in numerous press conferences, a few that press scrums, a few that I was in, that he wants to be, he wants to be a number one goaltender in this league. He's always wanted to be. And I don't think he can be. I don't think he's good enough to be. He's a great guy, but I just don't think he's up to that challenge. He may get that opportunity in a place like Calgary if Calgary doesn't get a Fleury or an Anderson. I mean, it would be a cheap option for them. But I don't think that the Leafs want to go for a sort of a half measure, for a stopgap. I think they want to solve their goaltending situation this summer, especially a year out from expansion when teams are going to trade goalies. So I think they can either get themselves the young goalie to build around and to build with, or the veteran guy if they sign Stamkos to contend within a year or two. But I don't think it's going to go back to that middle road of James Reimer and Jonathan Bernier. It's just going back to what doesn't work.
All right, we'll see. People I talk to seem to think differently right now, but that's this all can play. This all will play out in time, and we'll find out.
Dominoes that are going to fall. It's
Oh yeah, no, I mean, but there are scenarios that James Reimer ends up back there. There are definitely scenarios where James Reimer ends up back there. That's that's from what I've been told.
Leafs make too many moves until these other things are decided.
Yeah, that's for sure. Let's go to Keith Yan. Following too, another really interesting one. Another one whose rights could be traded, I was told, relatively shortly, because it is apparent that the Rangers aren't going to bring him back, even though they would like to, and they can't. They just can't afford him. He's asking for a really big number. and he's asking for too much right now. It's going to come down.
I'll tell you his minimum number, because Larry Brooks printed it, was 5 years, $5 million a year, 7-year deal. That's his minimum.
That's minimum.
35 for 7.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's his minimum deal.
Whoa.
And he's 30 years old, so that's basic. What that basically is if he takes a 5 or 6 year deal, the amount goes up. It probably goes up to 6.5 a year. I don't think teams want to sign a 30-year-old defenseman.
Somebody will.
No.
Who's game?
Somebody will, but I mean,
Somebody will with him. I mean, he's a good defenseman.
Somebody will.
I mean, he'll get that money. I think he will. I mean, $5 million 5 years from now too is not going to be that much. It's going to be less money for a defenseman too. So
now, here's the funny thing about trading the rights, and this is something where I think there's this perceived brashness about being a Boston Bruin that even extends to the media. And I like the media guys there, so I'm not trying to paint a brush on them. But there's just aura about the Bruins. So like basically, I did approach a writer there and said, well, when do you think they're going to buy Yandel's rights? And they were like, we don't need to buy Yandel's rights because he wants to play here. And I'm like, okay, yeah, and most years that's true, but not on a free agent year, and when he can get bigger money somewhere else. So you think they're going to sell the rights to Boston, or you think it's going to be trade the rights, or you think it's going to be to a different team?
I know a couple teams I've been told that are already trying to get his rights. Boston is one of them. LA is one of them. And Phoenix Arizona is another. So those are 3 teams that I was told.
Arizona makes so much sense because they're known to be looking for defensemen, and he did like it there.
He did like it there, and they liked him there. So those three are places that are going for it for now. I think his rights will get sold. I think that's pretty cocky for the Bruins to think that. I don't think the
Bruins think that.
Yeah, I think the Bruins media does. Yeah, I think you're right about that, because I don't think that's the case at all. And he would make sense in any one of those 3 cities. I mean, obviously, those are 3 places where he would fit really well.
Because Ty mentioned it on Friday that there could be some changes with the Bruins. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Dennis Seidenberg potentially being bought out of the final 2 years of his contract with his history of injury problems and advancing age. And if that happens, that opens up probably $3.5 million in cap space, and they can put that towards the Yandel. So I mean, that makes a bit of sense. But you have to look at the Bruins in the sense that you're plugging a bullet wound with a Band-Aid. That team is falling apart, and Keith Yandel in and of itself is not going to turn that team around. There are many other problems that the Bruins need to address.
Yeah, but the Bruins, though, although they are falling apart, the Bruins management is not looking at them like they're in a rebuild. That's the one thing I've noticed, and they're very different that way than any other team. Like they're not where they should be kind of where the Flyers were last year, but they're not. They're not there.
So do you think they'll trade one of their first-round picks to try and get a player to get out of this problem?
It'd be interesting to see. Could happen. I mean, they do want to get. I mean, they want to get better right away. They see themselves. I mean, and they're right. I mean, they weren't that far away from making the playoffs last year, which is true. And despite a lot of injuries and a lot of things, I mean, Krejci not really being a factor, and he's their best player sometimes. They have Pasternak's coming on. Pasternak's a star. He's a star in the making. They're going to see him as a star. Bergevin had a great year. Marchand had his best year by far. They do need defense. They still have Tuukka Rask, so they have a goalie, and they see themselves as only a couple moves away from being right in there again, and they're probably right. I mean, we're not, because we're talking about a division that's pretty weak overall, with the exception of Tampa, I would say, and Florida obviously, but I think Florida's going to be an interesting team next year for sure, whether they can repeat that or not, but. Yeah, I think that they're going to be looking to get right back into this thing. There's no rebuild in Boston. There isn't, and just like there hasn't been in Philly for many years. Philly finally admitted to it last year, but that took a lot. And this group in Boston is not going to do what Hextall did. They're not going to admit to there being a rebuild. That's not going to happen.
No, that's true. They're not going to do that.
That's not the personality of that group at all.
Well, I think the Bruins are living in denial because you've got some players who are core players like Bergeron, like Marchand, that you keep around. Chara is aging, but he's still effective. They really need to develop that secondary level of player. I mean, they got some.
So here's the funny thing. So you bring that up, and I look up Matt Bolesky's numbers, and I wasn't a big proponent of that signing. What did he get? 4.5? Was that about right a year?
Yeah.
No, less than 4. I think he was
less
like
than 4. It was like 3.7, 3.8,
Okay.
3.8. Yeah,
So for 3.7, was he worth it for 37 points? That's on the edge of not being worth it.
Yeah.
And everybody thought that he was going to get a lot more money based on the year that he had.
He's a good player though, like he's
a good player. He's not a great player.
His loss from Anaheim was significant. Like I think they missed him in Anaheim a lot.
They did miss him in Anaheim because they have bigger cogs.
Right.
The Bruins don't have a lot of big.
Right. It's a matter of the right piece in the right spot there. Real quick before we get into the prospect of the day, which I want to do, I want to just talk about Radim Vrbata for 1 minute. Vrbata is an interesting one because he has had some really great years and some really terrible years, and you never know what to expect from him. He seems that he had it together in Vancouver 2 years ago. Last year, not as much. He's always seemed to work out well when he ever goes to Arizona or Phoenix. He plays very well there, but then he has tough years other places. And I've heard that Europe's a really good possibility for him right now. I've heard people say, that he is. There's a couple European teams that are offering him quite a bit of money, and he's the kind of player that the Swiss league and stuff like that, they'd like to target, or Sweden, Yeah, so, I have heard Vancouver could still take him, New Jersey, Detroit,
I don't see why Vancouver
Montreal.
would go there again. I just
Yeah,
don't.
and that would be sort of a fallback position like Parento is with the Leafs. From every indication.
Right, that would be more if they can't get Louis Eriksson, which is really Vancouver's target. So, but as that plays out. But I think, Vrbata is pretty good, and when we lose pretty good players to Europe, I always think it's noteworthy. He's not a terrible player to be losing to Europe. He's definitely an NHLer.
He's a solid player.
He's an NHL player, but he might be a casualty of this cap not going up, of the fact that there's not enough money out there, and he can just make more money in Europe. And the bottom line is he can go there for a year and make 3 times as much as he makes here for less taxes and all that, and just move on. So who is the prospect of the day?
Logan Brown. So Logan Brown is Jeff Brown's kid. Jeff Brown was a defenseman. Eck probably remembers him. Mike remembers him. For sure. He was about
4.2 I think.
Yeah, he was like 6'1", 6'2", and Logan Brown is 6'6". Actually, I asked Logan Brown about it, and he said that he passed his dad in height somewhere in high school. Funny, because his dad was an NHLer. So everybody's salivating because he's a 6'6", 218-pound, presumably will be around 225 centerman, which is great. I also asked him if he gets mad if people say that he's fast for his size, because that's generally what people tend to do, is say, oh yeah, he moves well for a big guy, right? Like that's
right. Big guys don't move well, right?
Right, but he does move well. He doesn't get mad at it, but he definitely doesn't like it. He was somewhere in the middle and was being diplomatic about it, but you could tell he doesn't like it. So
the funny thing about that, Russ, not to interrupt, but I talked to somebody else about this just recently, so I bring this up, is and you as a scout, and a person who scouts these guys all the time would know, the fact is that the problem with big guys is not their speed, it's their acceleration, right? Like they're getting up to speed is the problem. Like, do they have enough space to get up to speed? They're strong and they can skate as fast as anybody, or faster because they have bigger legs, but can they is there quickness there to dart through a hole or to pick up anything? But
he doesn't have the quickness of Tyson Jost or Clayton Keller, but when he does get up to speed, he gets up there pretty quickly, and he's impossible to hold back at that point. He's got a lightning fast release. He's great in the slot. He's got a pro wrist shot. He will lay the big hit, so he's not a guy that, he plays physical, so that's a good thing. Again, excellent passer, son of an NHLer. So he's a guy that could go anywhere from 4 on down, because there could be a team out there that says, you know what, we have to get this guy because after Matthews, he's our next option to have as our huge franchise center, because I think I've told you, I don't think Pierre-Luc Dubois is a center. He will try and play center, but I don't think he's a center.
Brown has the widest disparity of any player, I think, in the first round. There are some mock drafts that have him in the mid to late teens, and there's some that have him 3, 4, 5. So, and Russ is correct. It's like, in terms of natural centers, there are some people that doubt the ability of Dubois to play at the middle. There are some people who are concerned about the size of Jost or the size of Keller. And Brown is the next guy after Matthews that has the physical package and has the skill package and plays center and is a natural center. So that's why, I mean, the thing is, it's like 6'6" with speed. I can understand why teams are salivating, but it's just a question of whether you think the whole thing is there. I mean, I've been doing up enough studying on some of these players, and I'm enticed by guys like Keller who have an immense skill package, and I think Brown is a very skillful player too. But there, you do see that sort of prejudice from some of these teams that, oh boy, I got to get that size guy, and that's the reason why they're so hot for Brown.
Yeah. I think he's a smart player. He's an engaging kid. He's obviously been brought up right, so all those things matter. I mean, I have him ranked 9th. It's not like, he's going to go through the roof and he's going to go 2nd, but he's probably going to go somewhere around 5.
So who's 9th? Who would 9th be?
Montreal is 9.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. Montreal, size and strength and center. That's definitely what they need.
He might not even last until 9. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also did some of my own research that I know you guys care a whole lot about, but
we do.
Of course we do.
Very interesting for fans of the league, and I stalked his social media. Yay!
Nice.
But
Our favorite stalker.
what was that?
Our favorite little stalker there, Jillian. Continue.
Your favorite stalker is here, and he is a very family-oriented person. It was really nice to see. One of my favorite pictures he posted was of he and his sister on his 21st birthday. And it was just so, he calls her his best friend, and they have lots of pictures together. And his Twitter is a lot about just him on his OHL team. So he's very hockey-focused. He's kind of that player you think of when you think of, puts his head down, is part of the team, has those values that you want. So I think he'd be a good fit for many teams in the NHL.
Nice. What do you know his Twitter account name by any chance?
Yes, I do. I have it up. He goes by, his Twitter is at 21L Brown.
21L Brown. There you go. So give him a follow.
His Instagram is Logan Brown 21.
How many followers does he have currently?
On which social media?
On Twitter.
Twitter, he has about 1,200 followers on Twitter.
I love the fact that I have more than Logan Brown, and we all do practically. But the minute he gets drafted, he'll get like 5,000 new followers in 10 minutes.
Let's do an experiment here, guys. Everybody's watching the show today. Let's follow him. Let's see what we can put up together. Let's see if we can double his Twitter following here.
And he's got a lot of hockey related stuff. It's he's not like a Zach Boychuk who's tweeting out so many different things from so many different you're talking about the Bachelorette and different going to the zoo and golfing. He's
he's a fun kid. No, he's a very media friendly, very fun kid. He is.
Also, that wasn't a stab at Zach Boychuk. I love following you on Twitter, so just so you know.
Zach Boychuk's a good follow. He is. He was always a good guy to talk to, and he actually follows me, so I appreciate him.
Yep. So, but yeah, Logan Brown, he is at 21L Brown.
21L.
And you won't get any surprises. And you won't get any social media surprises from him like you did from Yuri Talusti.
No. So all right, so give him a follow. Give him a follow and see if we can get his followership up to 2,000. That'd be fun. We can check it out tomorrow. I like that concept, Jillian. Great concept to go with his
following him, and I like it too. Yeah.
Social media aspect of this thing because it does show a lot. We have a nice little peek in, and he's also on Instagram at
Logan Brown 21.
Logan Brown 21 on Instagram. Perfect.
Brown 21. So. And it's funny because right now, so he does have a handful more of Instagram followers than he does. He has about 2,800 on Instagram. But it's funny because the only thing really what was that?
That's a good number for Instagram.
Yeah, it's pretty solid. It's a pretty solid number, but it does help that he and his entire family are very attractive people. They're very attractive. But it's.
And he's not on Snapchat.
So you're saying he would have more followers than Zdeno Chara's family on Instagram?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying it is helpful that when you're not yet in the NHL, you have not been drafted, that it does add a little bit to the appeal.
Oh yeah, for sure. And Mike, and I just followed him, and it turns out that Mike Ogello is a follower of his.
I just followed him.
It's pretty funny. You're a follower I know. There we have it.
I read along with the group. I said I was going to follow him, so I followed him. And now, when he's not drafted by the Leafs, I'll just unfollow him.
Oh.
That's not egocentric or anything. Pretty funny. All right, I think that's going to be good. Let's see. All right, I think that's all the time we have for today, guys. But that was a good show. A good, tidy little show. We'll be back again tomorrow at the normal time tomorrow, 1 o'clock. I'll be back for tomorrow. Now that I've gone through my son graduating from 5th to 6th grade, my daughter graduating from 8th to 9th grade. Over the course of 2 days, 2 meals with the full family, 3 meals actually with the full family, I should say. I am ready for some alone time, and so that's how we'll
I'm the
we'll go
expert
from
at
there.
that one.
Oh man, no, there were some comments today that were just, oh my goodness. Anyway, remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you soon.